Hello and welcome to Strategic News International. I'm Parul Chandra and with me is the Ambassador of Vietnam to India, Pham Sanh Chau. Ambassador Chau has been here for about 9 months and we're going to be talking to him about India-Vietnam bilateral relations, about the South China Sea dispute, the Quad, the BRI and many other things. Welcome to SNI, Ambassador Chau. It's a pleasure having you talking to us. So let me begin by asking you about the current standoff between Vietnam and China over the South China Sea. You know, there is a standoff going on between, I think, Chinese and Vietnamese Coast Guard vessels. So what is all this about?
We would like to take this opportunity to reaffirm once again Vietnam's consistent position that Vietnam does have full historical and legal evidence on the two archipelagos, namely Spat and Paracel. And we do have our sovereignty and sovereignty rights as well as jurisdiction over our waters in accordance with the international law, including the UNCLOS, International Law of the Sea, 1982. So any activities within the Vietnamese waters without Vietnamese permission will be valueless and violates the international law, especially the international law of the sea. Therefore, Vietnam's position is to persistently and resolutely struggle against any action that will infringe on our sovereignty right, and on our jurisdiction of the sea. But we are ready to settle all the dispute by peaceful means in accordance with international law. And that way of settling the dispute includes legal and diplomatic processes as well.
You mentioned this dispute that you have with China over the Spratly Islands as well as the Paracel Islands. So, are there any other disputes over, do the two countries have territorial claims over any other islands or reefs in the South China Sea? And is there any dispute resolution mechanism that is currently in force between the two countries?
Vietnam and China are comprehensive strategic partners. In a nutshell, we have very good relationship with China, and the relationship is evolving in a very constructive way. Nevertheless, we still have disputes over the sea. We have been able to address our dispute inland border by being able to demark the boundaries between the two countries. We have also been able to demark the Gulf, Tonkin Gulf, which neighbor our two countries. Now the remaining issue is in South China Sea. Vietnam and China both claim the Spratly, the Paracel Islands. So this is an issue that two countries have to sit down and to address it. In terms of the Spratly archipelagos, 5 countries and Taiwan reclaim this. So that issue needs to be addressed by the 6 parties. But larger than the issue of Spratly and Paracels is the questions of peace, security, freedom of navigation, freedom of overflight, and unimpeded trade and economic activities in this important maritime lane of the world. That matter needs to be addressed by all the parties concerned, and that should be addressed in conformity with international law, including the international law of the sea.
Yes, indeed. You see, recently there was this ASEAN document, its outlook on the Indo-Pacific. So it means that Vietnam is also on the Indo-Pacific. So is Vietnam also in consonance with the views of ASEAN on this,
Yes.
being a member of the ASEAN?
Yes, this is the latest document or paper reflecting the position of all ASEAN countries. ASEAN now is a community. So in our principle, in our way of functioning, we always get consensus between all the 10 ASEAN countries. So that reflects the position of not only ASEAN, but also of Vietnam. We hope to have an Indo-Pacific of peace, stability, and most importantly, it is a region of open, transparent, rule-based, and most importantly, inclusive.
Now, China's fear is that you see this whole Indo-Pacific construct is perhaps being built to counter its growing might in the region. So, does China have reasons to fear this construct?
In the speech addressed to the politicians and academia in Nehru Memorial Hall last year by our late President Chandra, he mentioned the vision of Vietnam in terms of Indo-Pacific region, which is very much in line with the position pursued by Indian government. We would like to have a free, open, transparent order, which is rule-based and which is inclusive. Having said that, cooperation in Indo-Pacific is open to everybody. So I don't think that there is any reason for fear by any country to be left out by this mechanism of cooperation.
Ambassador Chau, now let me draw your attention to another construct, the Quad. Now you have 4 countries, including India, who are members of it. And of course, they maintain that there is no military angle to this, to the Quad. If at any point of time in the future the Quad is expanded, would Vietnam consider being a part of it?
It is too premature to answer that question at this conjuncture. I think that Vietnam's position is that we welcomed all countries within or without the region if they are able to contribute to the maintenance of peace and security in the region. And we welcome all the initiatives that contribute to the process of maintaining peace and security in the region. So if Quad act in that direction, it is very much in line with the position of welcoming all the constructive initiative of Vietnam.
What about the Belt and Road Initiative of China? Now, India, of course, hasn't joined the initiative. It has its reasons for not having joined it, concerning, of course, sovereignty. And what is Vietnam's position on BRI? Is it part of it?
Yes, Vietnam is part of that. Vietnam welcomed that initiative because from Vietnam perspective, it will contribute to the building of economic prosperity for the countries concerned. With regards to positions vis-a-vis BRI, Vietnam respects Indian position, and we understand the reason behind Indian decision. With regard to Vietnam, we also have our own reason in welcoming this initiative, because we believe that if this initiative is well managed, it will contribute to prosperity and greater riches between the countries which are beneficiary of the initiative.
Okay, you spoke about economic prosperity that this initiative is likely to bring to countries who are part of it. But at the same time, there have been huge concerns about countries falling into a debt trap if they get into this BRI. So what are your views on this?
We understand that there are a number of issues that need to be addressed for the initiative. But from our point of view, on the nutshell, this is a positive initiative which is constructive and which care for prosperity of not only the countries in the region, but also of many other countries in different continents. That is the reason why it has been welcomed by many leaders when they participate at the recent second BRI summit in Beijing. And Vietnam share that positive impact of the initiative with other countries, and we have sent our Prime Minister to attend the summit.
Okay. Now let me bring you to this, this meeting between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, which was held in Hanoi.
Yes.
Now, why was it held in Hanoi? Does it reflect Vietnam's growing proximity to the US? Mm-hmm. And do we take it that it also shows that perhaps Vietnam is going to be using that again as a counter to China?
Let me say that Vietnam is very lucky and privileged to be chosen by both sides to organize its second summit in Hanoi. It reflects, number one, the increasing international prestige and position of Vietnam in the world. Number two, because Vietnam has entertained diplomatic relations both with DPR and with the United States. Mm-hmm. And number three, since we have been able to carry out successfully our economic reform, so I believe that other countries can take it as a model. Mm-hmm. With relations with United States, Vietnam also set a nice example of being able to put the past behind and build a relationship into the future with a former rivalry. So, having said that, I think that there are a number of elements that leads to the decision by the both sides to choose Vietnam, especially Hanoi, as a right destination.
Did Vietnam offer to host the meeting?
Yes, we did. But not only Vietnam offered to host, but I believe that many countries also offer to host the meeting. Mm-hmm. But interestingly, as you observed, so far only two ASEAN countries, namely Singapore and Vietnam, have been chosen. It means that ASEAN as the whole is in the process of making practical and effective contributory steps to peace and stability, not only in the region, but also to the process of denuclearization of the peninsula.
Yes, Korean Peninsula.
Korean Peninsula, yes.
You spoke about ASEAN, and now Vietnam is going to be the chair of ASEAN in 2020. What is Vietnam's vision of ASEAN, and what role do you see India playing with ASEAN?
Vietnam will be delighted and honored to chair ASEAN in next year, 2020, in the same time when Vietnam assumes its role as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. This is the second time Vietnam hosts officially the chairmanship of ASEAN, and it is also the second time Vietnam assumes its non-permanent seat at the UN Security Council. Therefore, our government have identified areas of priorities during this chairmanship. With regards to ASEAN chairmanship, we are determined to make ASEAN stronger, more united, and we care for the development of ASEAN community as a whole. but it also helps ASEAN to integrate more itself with the world community and strengthen its external partners. And we also try to build an ASEAN community in the three fronts, politically, economically, and socially. In that process of building a stronger ASEAN community, which will entertain more vigorously with international and external partners, India does have a very important role to play. The reason is ASEAN and India share a civilizational and historical link between the two sides. Most of the ASEAN countries have Indian cultural vestige and are very much influenced by Indian civilization and culture. Some countries within ASEAN are predominantly Buddhist country, and Lord Buddha was born here in this Indian continent, and Buddhism spread eastward, reaching ASEAN country. But more importantly, since India is one of the few strategic partners of ASEAN, especially when India uplifted its Look East policy to its Act East policy. And since the implementation of Act East policy, ASEAN naturally become one of the pillars of that policy.
Ambassador Chau, you just mentioned about India's Look East policy, and you see this RCEP is being negotiated by the ASEAN countries, but India has its reservations about joining RCEP. And what would you say to the reservations that India has about really getting onto the RCEP agreement?
One of the way to move forward our bilateral relations between ASEAN and India is connectivity. It can be physical connectivity, it can be economic activity, and it can be digital connectivity. In terms of economic activities, ASEAN and India have signed a free trade agreement in 2010. And at the moment, we are together with other partners are negotiating the final text for the RCEP.
Yes.
And recently, we have the meeting of Troika, namely the Trade Minister of India, Thailand,
Malaysia,
which is a chair of ASEAN, and Indonesia. We try to iron all the disputes in order to be able to achieve at the signing of this document at the end of this year, 2019. We were set to sign that document in last December.
Yes. Yeah.
But
late last year, but it didn't
could
happen.
not
Yes.
make it. So we welcome the strong determination expressed by Prime Minister Modi to sign that, and we tried to work out how we can move forward by getting over all the differences. On this ASEAN part, we understand the Indian reservation, and we try to make Indian understand also our interest to move forward to this document. Vietnam adopt a very open economy. Our economy is 2 times more open than our GDP, and Vietnam is the most open, populous country in the world. Therefore, Vietnam has a huge stake in the signing of RCEP. Recently, Vietnam has signed the EVFTA, which is a free trade agreement between the European Union and Vietnam. And before that, Vietnam ratified the TPP, which includes the 11 countries for a free trade agreement across the Atlantic. And in addition to that, Vietnam have also another 12 free trade agreements. Therefore, if we are able to sign RCEP, then almost the circus of free trade agreement for Vietnam is complete.
On that note, thank you so much for talking to SNI Ambassador Chau. It was a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.